Unfortunately, I keep getting richer. Episode 5. The most useless land in China. Bai Lianhua discovered the next morning that land was difficult to lose. This annoyed her because land looked very easy to lose. You bought it, stop touching it and waiting for weeds. There were no pumps to repair, no animals to feed, no engineers to accidentally send into orbit, and most importantly, no customers. A piece of empty ground could not sell sausages. She arrived at breakfast carrying the financial section of 3 newspapers and dropped them beside Zhou Ming's bowl. Find me land. Zhou continued eating. What kind? Bad. Chunmei looked up from a steamed bun. You own Qingshui Palace. That was secretly good land. It had 300 rooms and a lake. Exactly, deceptive. Old Wu's wife placed chili oil beside Lianhua without being asked. Lianhua regarded this as one of the more successful investments in the household. Zhou folded his napkin. Land is not a business. That is why I like it. Land can appreciate without producing anything. Lianhua stopped pouring chili. Why? Scarcity, location, infrastructure, planning decisions, population growth. Then find land with none of those. You are asking for land nobody wants. Yes. You have already purchased something nobody wanted. The house betrayed me. The house did not have agency. Neither did the rocket until it started making contracts. Chunmei nodded thoughtfully. She has a point. Zhou looked at her. She does not. Lianhua slid one of the newspapers towards him. The front page showed Tianwen lifting from Longhai beneath the headline Private Rocket Success, Opens New Industrial Era. I spent 5.4 billion yuan. Yes. And gained 26 billion. Conservatively. Do not add adjectives to the problem. What precisely do you intend to do with this land? Nothing. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No hotel, no aquarium, no factory, no rocket. I will buy dirt and leave it being dirt. Zhou leaned back. For how long? Until I am poorer. That may take some time. Good, it can lose money slowly. Chunmei tore her bun in half. Does dirt cost maintenance? Lianhua looked at Zhou. Does it? Property taxes, security, environmental obligations, drainage, access roads in some jurisdictions, legal compliance, boundary management. Her expression brightened. Find expensive dirt. By 10 that morning, Gu Corp's property division had been given an instruction nobody initially believed. The request traveled from Zhou Ming to Deputy Director Han, from Deputy Director Han to the Land Acquisitions Team, and from the Land Acquisitions Team back to Deputy Director Han with a handwritten question in the margin. Are we looking for development potential? Han wrote beneath it. No. The file returned 15 minutes later. Then what are we looking for? Han called Zhou. Zhou called Lianhua. She was in the eastern courtyard of Qingshui Palace watching workers restore a stone lion. They require clarification. I was clear. Property professionals are not trained to identify land specifically because it has no value. That seems like a weakness in the profession. They need criteria. Lianhua watched a mason replace the lion's missing ear. Far from Jinhai. How far? Far enough that nobody can call it the next district. No current development. None. No announced infrastructure. None. No obvious tourism value. No lakes. I have learned about lakes. No mineral resources. Nothing useful underground. No productive farmland. She frowned. Not if people need it. Joe paused. So unproductive land, but not land whose purchase would displace farmers or residents. Obviously. Environmental liabilities. Expensive ones. You want contaminated land. Only if cleaning it makes it worth less than I spend. Cleaning contaminated land generally makes it worth more. Why is everything like this? The mason looked over. Lianhua lowered her voice. Find somewhere people tried to use and regretted it. Joe considered that. That may actually narrow the search. The first list contained 27 sites. Lianhua rejected a coastal salt marsh because Joe mentioned a proposed port 60 kilometers away. She rejected an abandoned mining basin after learning the tailings contained recoverable rare metals. She rejected a dry valley because a university report suggested wind power potential. She rejected a former military depot because the highway was too close. By the 8th rejection, Deputy Director Han had begun removing anything with a view. The 11th site was a plateau in Long County called Bai Lianhua. The file arrived at Qingshui Palace 3 days after the Tianyuan celebration. Joe placed it on the dining table. 112 square kilometers. Lianhua looked up. How many Qingshui palaces is that? Approximately 460 estate grounds. Good. Most of the land is saline alkali scrub. The northern section contains an abandoned brickworks and a chemical storage yard closed 9 years ago. Better. The county attempted to establish an industrial park there in 1993. 2 factories opened. Both failed. Why? Poor transport links, unreliable water supply and soil subsidence along the old riverbed. Excellent. The brickworks lost money for 6 consecutive years. Stop selling it to me. The chemical yard requires remediation. How much? Estimates range from 600 million to 1.1 billion yuan, depending on the standard applied. Use the expensive standard. The land use rights themselves are being offered through a county restructuring vehicle for approximately 6.8 billion yuan. Chunmei, who had been reading over Lianhua's shoulder, made a sound. For dirt. For 112 square kilometers of dirt, Joe said. Can we see the dirt? Lianhua closed the file. Tomorrow. They traveled to Bai Lianhua in 2 cars because Joe refused to allow Chunmei to sit on a box of survey documents for 3 hours. The motorway ended after 90 minutes. The provincial road narrowed after another 40. Then the road became a strip of patched concrete that appeared to have been repaired by people who disliked one another. Lianhua approved immediately. This is terrible. The county plans to resurface it eventually, Joe said. Eventually is acceptable. Eventually can become next year. Tell them not to hurry. The landscape flattened as they approached Bai Lianhua. Summer grass had dried to pale straw. White crusts of salt showed through the soil. Low ridges ran towards a horizon interrupted only by power pylons and the broken chimney of the old brickworks. There were no houses. No shops. No billboards. No lakes. Lianhua stepped out of the car and turned in a slow circle. Wind pushed hair across her face. There is nothing here. The County Land Bureau director, a narrow man named Gao Weiming, smiled nervously. There is significant long-term potential. Lianhua's expression changed. What potential? Gao's smile weakened. I mean in the broadest sense. What broad sense? Zhou intervened. Director Gao, Miss Bai is interested in the site's current limitations. Please emphasize those. Gao looked from him to Lianhua. It was possibly the first time in his career a buyer had requested a worse sales pitch. The ground has high salinity, he said. Agricultural productivity is poor. The old industrial zone left some contamination. Water must be piped from the southern treatment works. The nearest freight rail connection is 47 kilometers away. Lianhua relaxed. Anything else? Winter winds are severe. Good. Dust storms occur in spring. Very good. The western access, road floods during heavy rain. Excellent. Gao stopped. Chunmei whispered to Zhou, he thinks she is insane. He is not alone. They drove across the site in an old county jeep. The abandoned brickworks consisted of 3 long sheds, a kiln and a chimney leaning slightly east. Rusted rails disappeared beneath weeds. The chemical storage yard sat behind a concrete wall covered in faded hazard symbols. Lianhua refused to enter until the environmental team confirmed protective equipment was unnecessary. Inside, empty tanks stood beneath corrugated roofs. Rainwater had collected in cracked containment channels. A consultant named Professor Lin described solvent residue in the soil. The contamination is concentrated, he said. It has not migrated significantly beyond the storage boundary. Can it hurt anyone? Lianhua asked. If left unmanaged, groundwater risk increases over time. Then clean it. That will be part of any redevelopment requirement. No, clean it whether we redevelop or not. Professor Lin looked at Zhou. Lianhua sighed. Belle. I beg your pardon. Nothing. How much for the best remediation? Full excavation, thermal treatment of contaminated soil, groundwater monitoring and replacement of the old tanks could reach 1.2 billion yuan. Do that. Zhou spoke before the consultant could answer. You do not own the site yet. Put it in the purchase agreement. Director Gao looked delighted. The county would welcome a commitment to remediation. Does the county pay anything? There are environmental grants available. No grants. His delight became confusion. Miss Bai, the program could cover up to 30%. Then give it to someone who needs 30%. Zhou did not argue. Lianhua noticed. Why aren't you arguing? You have made your position on subsidies predictable. Good. Your position on land remains less clear. They continued north. At the highest point of the plateau, the entire tract became visible. It was enormous. The old industrial zone occupied only a small gray patch near the road. Beyond it stretched kilometer after kilometer of scrub, salt-white soil and low ridges. Lianhua climbed onto a concrete foundation left from a warehouse that had never been built. The wind nearly took her coat. This is perfect. Zhou stood below. You have not asked about zoning. Her smile disappeared. What zoning? General industrial and ecological rehabilitation. No residential development without a new plan. Excellent. Low-density manufacturing is permitted in the eastern sector. Bad. The western sector is restricted because of the old riverbed. Better. There is an existing high-voltage transmission line. Why? The factories required power. Can we remove it? No. Can we refuse to connect anything to it? Certainly. Then it can stand there and think about what it has done. Gao coughed into his hand. Lianhua looked towards the horizon. Who owns the land now? A county restructuring company, Gao said. The industrial rights were consolidated after the previous ventures failed. Any residents? No permanent residents within the transaction boundary. 2 shepherd families use seasonal grazing routes along the southern edge. Their rights are protected separately. Keep them protected. Of course. If fences interfere with them, move the fences. Gao nodded. And no one is being removed. No. Lianhua looked at Zhou. Buy it. You have inspected it for 43 minutes. I inspected the palace for less. That is not reassuring. How long does dirt require? The negotiations took 12 days. Not because Lianhua reconsidered. She did not. They took 12 days because Attorney Liu discovered that the county restructuring company had attempted to include a future development premium in the price. Lianhua found this offensive for a different reason than everyone expected. They think it might become valuable. They would like to be compensated for the possibility, Attorney Liu said. Remove the possibility. Legally. Financially. Zhou sat at the end of the Qingshui Palace library table, while 3 property lawyers reviewed maps. You cannot contract away market value. Then lower the price. That is what Attorney Liu is doing. Lianhua considered this. Fine, but I still want to spend 6.8 billion. Attorney Liu stopped writing. If I negotiate the purchase price down, you want to pay the difference elsewhere. On cleanup, drainage, fix the flooded road, plant things that keep the soil from blowing away. Those improvements may increase the value. Then plant ugly things. Professor Lin, attending by telephone, said, vegetation does not become less useful because it is unattractive. That is inconvenient. The final agreement cost Lianhua 6.1 billion yuan for the land use rights. She committed another 1.4 billion to environmental remediation, 700 million to drainage and soil stabilization, and 800 million to water infrastructure that would supply maintenance crews and fire protection. Total committed spending, 9 billion yuan. Zhou read the figure aloud in the signing room. Lianhua smiled. And no business. No operating business. No customers. None. No visitors. Unless you begin charging people to look at salt. Do not suggest things. She signed. The newspapers found out before dinner. Bai Lianhua acquires 112 SQKM Baiyuan tract. Gu heiress makes largest private land purchase of the year. Market searches for logic behind Baiyuan deal. One columnist wrote that Bai was clearly positioning herself ahead of an unannounced infrastructure program. Lianhua read the sentence twice. Can they legally invent roads? They are speculating, Zhou said. Tell them there are no roads. We issued a statement saying there are no planned development projects. And they interpreted the denial as confirmation that discussions are confidential. She put the newspaper down. Who teaches these people? Other people who write newspapers. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. It was the happiest period of Bai Lianhua's financial life. Money left her accounts every day. Environmental contractors arrived at Baiyuan. Contaminated soil was excavated and transported to a treatment facility. Monitoring wells appeared around the old chemical yard. Engineers demolished the unsafe brick kiln and stabilized the leaning chimney because Lianhua refused to let workers stand beneath something that might fall. The land produced nothing. No tickets. No rockets. No sausages. Every weekly report contained only expenses. At the end of the first month, Lianhua invited Director Gao, Professor Lin, and the remediation contractor to Kingshui Palace for dinner. Zhou suspected celebration. He was correct. "How much have we spent?" she asked before anyone had finished the first course. The contractor checked his notebook. Including mobilization, treatment, and drainage works, approximately 430 million yuan. Revenue? None. Lianhua lifted her cup. To Bai Yuan. Professor Lin raised his tea uncertainly. Director Gao followed. Zhou did not. "You are celebrating an environmental remediation invoice. It is the first honest thing I have bought." Chunmei clinked her cup against Lianhua's. To dirt. 2 days later, Chen Kaifeng called. Lianhua was in the palace kitchen arguing with old Wu's wife about whether 6 dumplings constituted lunch. Zhou answered the telephone. He listened for a minute. Then he looked at Lianhua. She noticed immediately. "No. I have not said anything. Your face said something. Chen wants to speak with you. Tell him the rocket already made money. This is not about the rocket. Then he can speak." Zhou handed her the receiver. Chen's voice came through with factory noise behind it. "Miss Bai, I have a question." That is already a bad start. Tianyuan needs a new ground test complex. Lianhua stopped chewing. Use the old one. The old stand cannot support the next engine class. Build beside it. The safety exclusion zone would cross 2 villages. We will not do that. She swallowed. Good, find somewhere else. We did. Silence. Zhou removed the dumpling basket from her reach, as though preparing for impact. Where? She asked. Bai Yuan. Lianhua closed her eyes. Chunmei whispered, the dirt. The dirt. Lianhua opened her eyes. No. Chen paused. You have not seen the proposal. I bought the land specifically, so nobody would propose anything. It is almost ideal. That is impossible. Low population density, industrial zoning, high voltage power, prevailing winds away from settled areas, existing buffer land, and enough space for multiple test stands. Lianhua looked at Zhou. You said the wind was bad. It is bad for people living there, Zhou said. That does not mean it is bad for rocket exhaust dispersion. You knew. I did not know Tianyuan would require a larger test site. Chen continued through the receiver. The old chemical zone is already being remediated. We could use the eastern industrial sector without interfering with the ecological work. How much land? 71 square kilometers, including safety corridors. Lianhua stared through the kitchen window. The backward-eyed shark sat on a chair beside the model rocket. She had moved them apart twice. Chunmei kept putting them together. Pay rent, Lianhua said. Chen hesitated. Of course. Expensive rent. Zhou's eyebrows rose. How expensive? Chen asked. Lianhua covered the receiver. How much can Tianyuan afford? You own Tianyuan, Zhou said. That was not my question. Its current cash position is strong after the new contracts. Good, charge them market rent. That would move money from one of your companies to your personal land holding. She uncovered the receiver. Cheap rent. How cheap? Chen asked. 1 yuan. Zhou put his hand over the receiver. For 71 square kilometers. Per year. That may create accounting and regulatory issues. 10 yuan. That does not solve them. Fine, whatever the lowest legal amount is. Chen said, we can structure it as a long-term industrial lease at nominal cost if the board approves capital improvements. Lianhua became suspicious. What improvements? Test stands, roads, blast berms, water systems, control bunkers, workshops. Who pays? Tianyuan. No. No. I pay. Zhou closed his eyes. Chen was silent for several seconds. Miss Bai, Tianyuan can fund its own facilities now. That sounds profitable. I don't like it. We need the site regardless. Then I will build it and rent it to you cheaply. Zhou reclaimed the receiver. Chen, send the technical requirements to my office. Do not commit to any site works until legal and regulatory review is complete. He ended the call. Lianhua reached for a dumpling. He moved the basket farther away. What? You purchased 9 billion yuan of supposedly useless land. Yes. And you have just volunteered to spend more money making it useful. For almost no rent. That distinction will comfort the valuers. The valuers arrived 4 days later. There were 3 of them. Lianhua disliked all 3 before introductions finished. They walked Bai Yuan wearing hard hats and carrying maps. Chen joined them with Tianyuan's propulsion director and 2 safety engineers. Orange stakes marked the proposed boundary of the test complex. The first stand would sit in a shallow basin east of the old brickworks. Earthen berms would channel blast away from the control bunkers. A service road would connect to the provincial route. Water tanks would feed fire suppression and acoustic damping systems. Lianhua listened until the lead valuer, MS Kaio, said the sentence she had feared. If Tianyuan establishes its principal propulsion complex here, comparable industrial land values will change substantially. Don't change them. MS Kaio glanced at Zhou. Market values are not set by instruction. Everything has rules until I buy it. The presence of a nationally recognized aerospace company changes the site's economic profile. It is the same dirt. Location is relational. Lianhua looked at Chunmei. What does that mean? The dirt made friends. MS Kaio smiled despite herself. In essence. Can we stop at making friends? Chen pointed towards the northern ridge. We actually need suppliers nearby. No. Cryogenic systems, valves, composite repair, instrumentation. Moving everything from Jinhai wastes time. Waste time. It also wastes money. Lianhua paused. How much? Zhou immediately said, do not encourage him. Chen thought. Transport and logistics could add 200 million yuan annually once launch cadence increases. Lianhua looked pleased. Excellent, keep them far away. The propulsion director shook his head. It also creates schedule risk. Less excellent. And some components cannot be transported after final assembly. Why? Size, fragility, hazard classification. Lianhua stared at the empty plateau. How many suppliers? Initially 12, eventually perhaps 40. They can rent. Zhou said, at market rates. No. Of course not. At the lowest rate that keeps the tax people from visiting my kitchen. MS Kaio stopped writing. Miss Bai, below-market industrial leases will themselves attract companies. Why? Everyone looked at her. Because they are below market, Chunmei said. Lianhua rubbed her forehead. Fine, charge enough that they hesitate. Then they may not come, Chen said. Good. Then Tianyuan's costs rise. Also good. Then the next rocket costs more. Excellent. And the company's margins fall. Chen, you're finally learning. He laughed. The safety engineer did not. We still need the site. The first test stand cost 1.6 billion yuan. Lianhua approved too. Chen objected. We only need one now. What happens if it explodes? The stand is designed not to. That is what you said about the engine. We can repair a stand. Build two. That doubles several fixed systems. Good. It also allows parallel engine development. Lianhua stared at him. Chen realized his mistake. I should not have said that. No. The final Baiyuan aerospace budget reached 4.8 billion yuan before construction began. Zhou placed the approval papers in front of her. Your total committed expenditure on the site is now 13.8 billion yuan. And annual rent from Tianyuan. After legal review, 120 million. Lianhua frowned. Too much. For 71 square kilometers, it is exceptionally low. Can I charge 80? You can. 50. You can. 1. No. Why did you let me keep asking? I wanted to see where you stopped. She signed at 50 million. Construction transformed Baiyuan with alarming speed. The first thing to arrive was water. A pipeline extended from the southern treatment works to the test basin. The county used Lianhua's trenching project to replace several kilometers of old village supply pipe along the route. Lianhua did not object because the villages needed water. The second thing to arrive was electricity. The old high-voltage line was upgraded to support Tianyuan's test equipment. The grid company replaced 2 unreliable substations serving nearby towns as part of the work. Lianhua objected briefly. Then Zhou told her the towns had suffered winter outages. She stopped objecting. The third thing to arrive was road crews. That caused a fight. Lianhua stood in the middle of the old provincial road, wearing a hard hat, while Deputy Director Han explained the problem. Heavy equipment cannot reach the site safely on the current surface. Drive slowly. Some transporters weigh more than 100 tons. Drive very slowly. The bridge at kilometer 26 cannot support them. Use smaller rockets. Chen, standing beside him, said, No. You work for me. Not on bridge physics. The county proposed widening 38 kilometers of road and replacing the bridge. The Provincial Transport Bureau offered to pay half because the road also served 6 villages and 2 townships. Lianhua refused the subsidy. Director Gao arrived personally to argue. Miss Bai, this is public infrastructure. Then use your money on a different public road. The province has already allocated the funds. Give them back. That is not how provincial budgets work. Why does everyone say that about money? Zhou stood beside the ditch and let the argument continue for 12 minutes. Finally, he said, There is another option. Lianhua turned. Bad or good? For you, probably both. The province would build the public sections. Lianhua would fund reinforced industrial spurs, the replacement bridge deck required specifically for aerospace loads, and a bypass around the largest village. The bypass added 400 million yuan. Lianhua agreed immediately. Director Gao looked delighted. The bypass has been requested for 8 years. Her expression changed. Will it make the land valuable? It will make the village quieter. She signed. Fine. Chunmei watched the villagers bring tea to the road workers 2 weeks later. You realize you're doing it again. Lianhua stood beside a pile of drainage pipe. Doing what? Spending money on things people actually need. The bridge is for rockets. The bypass is for the village. The village was in the way of the rockets. Of course. Stop saying it like that. The first supplier request arrived before the bridge opened. It came from Jinhai Cryogenic Systems, which manufactured valves for Tianyuan. They wanted 6 hectares beside the new test complex. Lianhua rejected it. The second request came from a sensor manufacturer. Rejected. The third came from a university laboratory that wanted to establish a materials testing center. Rejected. The fourth came from a canteen operator. Lianhua paused. How many workers are at Baiyuan now? More than 2,000, Zhou said. Where do they eat? Temporary kitchens and food trucks. Are they expensive? Moderately. Are they good? Zhou looked at Chunmei. She had visited the site the previous day. One truck sells noodles that taste like wet rope. Lianhua approved the canteen. At cost? Zhou nodded. Of course. The canteen operator declined because there was no profit. Lianhua built the canteen herself and hired staff. Then she added a clinic after a welder cut his hand and had to travel 40 minutes for stitches. Then she added dormitories because engineers were sleeping in temporary containers. Then she added a laundry because the dormitories created a washing problem. Then she added a small shop because the laundry staff needed somewhere to buy toothpaste. One evening, Zhou found her standing before a new site map. The map contained a test complex, 2 dormitory blocks, a clinic, canteen, maintenance depot, fire station, and shop. You built a town, he said. No. It has a clinic. Factories have clinics. It has a shop. People need toothpaste. It has a bus route. The workers need to get home. It has 3,600 people during the day. They leave at night. Not the dormitory workers. Lianhua looked at the map. It is an inconvenient factory. Zhou pointed at a rectangle near the southern gate. What is this? Daycare center. Factories do not normally have daycare centers. Then they should. He lowered his hand. I see. Do not see things. The Baiyuan Development Conference took place without Bai Lianhua. She had refused the invitation because it contained the word development. Zhou attended on her behalf. The county government presented revised economic figures. Tianyuan's presence had already attracted applications from 37 suppliers. The new road had reduced travel time to the county seat by 40 minutes. 2 logistics companies proposed depots outside Bai's boundary. A vocational college wanted to open an aerospace maintenance program. Director Gao described Baiyuan as an emerging strategic industrial cluster. Zhou asked him not to use the phrase around Lianhua. The warning arrived too late. A newspaper used it the next morning. Baiyuan, from wasteland to strategic industrial cluster. Lianhua entered Zhou's study carrying the paper. Fix this. The article. The cluster. It is not a formal designation. Good, stop it before it becomes one. We do not control county economic policy. Then tell them I refuse. Refuse what? Clustering. Zhou folded his hands. Companies are asking to locate near Tianyuan because it reduces their costs. I said no. You said no to facilities on your land. Several have purchased or leased land outside your boundary. From whom? The county, private holders, village collectives were permitted. Can I buy that too? Joe stared at her. To stop them, you intend to prevent land appreciation by purchasing more appreciating land. Lianhua considered the sentence. When you say it like that, it sounds stupid. I was aiming for clarity. She sat opposite him. How much is Baiyuan worth now? We do not have a reliable figure. That is a suspicious answer. The value depends on assumptions about future development. Assume none. Then roughly what you paid, adjusted for remediation. She relaxed. Good. If the aerospace complex proceeds as planned, the Eastern Industrial Section alone could be valued at 25 to 30 billion yuan. Her face emptied. How much did I pay? 6.1 for the rights. And the whole site. Potentially 40 billion or more. Because I put rockets on dirt. Because you put a major aerospace employer, upgraded infrastructure, and environmental remediation on dirt. It was happier before. The dirt. Me. At Shen Development, Shen Yudong received the Baiyuan report with considerably more interest. Her assistant placed aerial photographs across the table. The western tracks remain cheap. Why? Flood risk, ecological restrictions, and distance from the test complex. Buy options. He hesitated. Miss Shen, the market already assumes Baiyuan will expand. Prices have doubled in some neighboring parcels. Then buy before they triple. Bai Lianhua has refused commercial development on her own land. She refuses everything before doing it. She may genuinely want the site kept low density. Shen looked at the photograph of test stand foundations crossing the plateau. She bought 112 square kilometers of worthless ground 3 weeks before Tianyuan announced its expansion requirement. The requirement was not public. Exactly. Her assistant said nothing. Shen tapped the map. Buy the western options, quietly. The first Tianyuan engine test at Baiyuan occurred in November. The test article was larger than the engine that had exploded outside Jinhai months earlier. Its combustion chamber alone cost more than Lianhua's childhood neighborhood. She arrived hoping for an expensive problem. Chen refused to let her near the stand. Observation bunker. I can see from here. Observation bunker. How far? 3 kilometers. That seems excessive. That is why we bought 71 square kilometers. I bought 71 square kilometers. Then enjoy them from the bunker. The control room sat half underground behind a ridge. Thick glass faced the test basin. Engineers occupied consoles, while cameras showed the engine mounted vertically beneath the stand. Chunmei wore hearing protection over her ears and another pair around her neck, because she did not trust the first pair. How loud? She asked. Very, Chen said. Lianhua looked at the budget display. How expensive? The engine is 190 million yuan. Better. The stand is designed to survive. Worse. The countdown reached 0. Ignition turned the basin white. Even through the bunker, the sound pressed against Lianhua's chest. A column of flame struck the trench and rolled sideways between the berms. Water suppression became steam. The engine ran for 10 seconds. 20. 30. At 42 seconds, one monitor flashed amber. Lianhua leaned forward. An engineer called, turbopump temperature rising. Chen answered, within abort band, continue. 50 seconds. 60. The engine shut down cleanly at 75. Silence returned slowly. Engineers began clapping. Lianhua did not. Nothing broke. Chen removed his headset. Nothing important. The amber light. A sensor margin. We expected it. How much did the test cost? Propellant, inspection, stand operations, perhaps 9 million. That is not enough. Chunmei lifted one ear protector. The land cost 9 billion. The land is making friends. Outside the bunker, the test had been heard across Long County. People gathered on distant hills to watch the plume rise above the plateau. Local restaurants filled that evening with engineers, contractors, and curious families. One restaurant owner renamed his hottest noodle dish rocket exhaust. Lianhua learned this because Chunmei ordered it. It's not spicy, she said after one bite. Lianhua tasted it. It is insulting the rocket. The owner overheard and doubled the chili the following week. The second test brought television crews. The third brought a university delegation. The fourth brought foreign industry observers. Lianhua asked whether they could charge visitors enough to discourage them. Zhou explained that most stood outside her property boundary. She considered buying the hill. He refused to discuss it. By December, the Baiyuan site had 6,000 workers. Supplier pressure became impossible to ignore. Tianyuan's board formally requested that Lianhua lease 14 small industrial parcels to critical suppliers. She attended the meeting because Chen threatened to bring the entire board to her kitchen otherwise. The supplier list appeared on a screen. Cryogenic valves, flight computers, composite structures, precision bearings, telemetry systems, safety equipment, industrial gases. Lianhua pointed at the last one. Gas sounds expensive to transport. It is, Chen said. Keep that one far away. It is also dangerous to transport repeatedly over long distances. She removed her finger. Fine, that one can come. The bearing supplier. How dangerous? Mostly expensive. Keep them far away. Their delays shut down engine assembly. How much does that cost? Several million yuan per day. Lianhua considered it. Far away. Zhou said, your goal is not to sabotage Tianyuan. No. Then perhaps we should distinguish productive expense from operational obstruction. That sounds like something accountants invented to protect money. It is something managers invented to protect sanity. The compromise allowed 7 suppliers onto the eastern edge of Baiyuan. Lianhua set leases at half the prevailing industrial rate. The suppliers accepted before the contracts finished printing. Raise it, she said. Attorney Liu looked at her. You instructed half market rate. They were too happy. The contracts are not signed yet. Raise it to 75%. All 7 still accepted. Market rate. They accepted. 10% above. 6 accepted. Lianhua pointed at the one that withdrew. See, reasonable people. The 7th supplier returned 2 days later and accepted 15% above market because the alternative logistics costs were higher. Lianhua stopped adjusting rents. Zhou wisely did not smile. The county government announced the Baiyuan Aerospace Industrial Demonstration Zone in January. They sent the official notice to Kingshui Palace by courier. Old Wu carried the envelope into breakfast. Lianhua recognized the seal. Send it back. It is addressed to you. That is how they get you. Zhou opened it. The zone includes Baiyuan and surrounding county land. No. It provides streamlined permitting for aerospace suppliers, vocational training grants, and infrastructure coordination. No. It does not take your land. Still no. You cannot veto a county planning designation outside your property. Then why did they send me the letter? Because your property is the center of it. Lianhua put down her chopsticks. I bought the most useless land in China. Apparently, the title was temporary. Chunmei took the notice. They printed your name 3 times. Cross it out. That will not change the zone. It will improve the paper. The announcement triggered the largest speculative rush Long County had seen in decades. Hotels filled. Land brokers appeared in towns that had never had land brokers. Restaurant menus acquired rockets, stars, and words like orbital. Shen Development's Western options tripled in value within a week. Shen Yudong sold half. Her assistant congratulated her. She did not look pleased. Why only triple? The western side is restricted. Bai's land surrounds most viable industrial access. Then she controls the gateway. Effectively. Shen looked at the county map. A huge block marked by Lianhua Holdings sat across the center like an accusation. She bought it before the zone existed. Yes. And refuses to sell. Yes. Which makes every parcel around it more expensive. Yes. She leaned back. I hate her. Her assistant chose silence. At Baiyuan, Lianhua dealt with the speculation differently. She banned residential resale schemes on any subleases she controlled. She refused a luxury hotel proposal. She refused a golf course before the presenter reached the second slide. She refused a shopping mall. She refused a theme park called Rocket Kingdom. Absolutely not. The developer looked wounded. The centerpiece would be a full-scale launch simulation. There's a real rocket test 5 kilometers away. Exactly, it creates synergy. Leave. She approved a second clinic. She approved a vocational school workshop. She approved a larger canteen. She approved a public bus terminal after learning apprentices were walking 3 kilometers from the old stop. She approved a fire brigade training yard because Tianyuan's safety team asked for one. She approved nothing that produced a convincing return. This made investors admire her even more. Financial newspapers described her refusal to sell as disciplined control of strategic land. Analysts praised her for avoiding premature commercialization. One television program called it Bai Lianhua's empty land doctrine. She watched 7 minutes before turning it off. I do not have a doctrine. Old Wu's wife stirred soup. You have rules. Rules are different. What is the rule? Do not make money. How is that going? Lianhua looked at the television. Poorly. The first formal valuation arrived in February. Zhou did not bring it to breakfast. That was how Lianhua knew it was bad. She found him in the library after lunch. Where is it? Where is what? The number you are hiding. I am reading a contract. You read contracts at breakfast when the numbers are normal. There has not been a normal number in this house for several months. She sat opposite him. How much? He removed a report from beneath the contract. Independent valuation of your Baiyuan rights and associated infrastructure. Use the lowest methodology. The valuers provided 3. Use the one written by the saddest person. Zhou turned to the first page. 58 billion yuan. Lianhua stared. That is not sad. The income capitalization model is 63. Stop. Comparable strategic industrial land suggests 71. I said stop. He closed the report. She looked through the library windows at Qingshui Palace's restored Eastern Garden. I spent 13.8 billion. Approximately. And the land is worth 58. At minimum, according to this report. It was salt. Much of it remains salt. Then why is salt worth 58 billion? Because companies want to stand on it. Tell them to stand somewhere else. They are willing to pay for the privilege. Lianhua stood and began walking around the table. No hidden mineral deposit. None. No airport. None planned. No railway station. Not yet. She stopped. Not yet. Zhou did not answer quickly enough. What railway? The Provincial Planning Bureau is studying a freight spur. No. You cannot refuse a study. I can refuse the railway crossing my land. Possibly. Good, refuse it. Tianyuan requested the spur. Silence. Why? Rocket stages are large. Use the terrible road. You replace the terrible road. Then make it terrible again. Zhou looked at her over the report. No. She sat down. Everyone has become difficult. A week later, she traveled to Baiyuan to inspect the proposed freight route personally. Snow lay in thin patches along the ridges. The winter wind was strong enough to push dust across frozen ground. The site no longer looked empty. Test stands rose behind earthen berms. Workshops stretched along the eastern road. Supplier buildings carried new signs. Buses moved between dormitories and factory gates. The clinic had expanded into a small medical center. At the southern boundary, the shepherd families still moved their animals along the protected grazing corridor. Lianhua noticed before anything else. The fences moved. Director Gao nodded. As you instructed. An older shepherd, named Uncle Pei, approached with his grandson. Lianhua had met him once during the original survey. He handed her a cloth bag. Dried cheese. Why? For the road. The road was for rockets. It also reaches our winter camp now. She looked at the bag. You don't owe me food. I know. He pushed it into her hands anyway. His grandson pointed towards the distant test tower. Will it explode today? Lianhua brightened. Hopefully. Director Gao coughed. Uncle Pei laughed. They say you don't mean that. People say many inaccurate things. The freight route crossed the northern edge of the site, far from the grazing corridor and remediation zone. Chen walked the alignment with her. If we build the spur, each heavy transport costs less. That is why I don't like it. We also reduce road closures and accident risk. That I like. And suppliers can move materials directly from the national network. That I don't. And workers can eventually use passenger service if the province adds it. Why did you add eventually? Because they are discussing it. She stopped walking. No station. I don't control passenger rail. Then, why is everyone building things on my dirt? Because you made the dirt useful. I made it safe. Chen nodded. Sometimes those are the same thing. She looked towards the test complex. A plume of steam rose from a stand being prepared for another firing. You sound like Joe. He is contagious. The freight spur was approved. Lianhua paid for the section inside Bai Yuan because the province's contribution would otherwise reduce her costs. The province paid outside the boundary. The first budget estimate was 1.3 billion yuan. She approved it. The revised estimate came in at 1.6. She approved that too. Then engineers discovered soft soil beneath 2 kilometers of the alignment. The final cost reached 2.2 billion. Lianhua sent the geotechnical engineer a fruit basket. He thought it was sarcasm. It was not. By spring, her total Baiyuan spending had crossed 16 billion yuan. The valuation crossed 80. She stopped asking Joe for updates. This did not stop the updates existing. One arrived in the form of a municipal delegation at Qingshui Palace. Deputy Director Han brought them to the library. Lianhua looked at the 12 people around the table. Why are there so many? They represent transport, education, industry, and regional planning, Han said. That sounds expensive. A planning official smiled. Miss Bai, Baiyuan's growth has created an opportunity for coordinated regional development. No. He had not opened his folder yet. Perhaps you could hear the proposal. Does it contain development? Yes. Then I have heard enough. Joe sat beside her. Listen. She turned. Whose side are you on? The side that would like to know what 12 government officials came here to say. The proposal was a new technical university campus specializing in aerospace engineering, materials science, and industrial safety. The preferred site was outside Bai's boundary, near the town of Longhe. Lianhua relaxed. Then the official continued. Tianyuan and Gu Industrial would be invited to participate in training programs. Invited means pay. There would be partnership opportunities. That also means pay. Scholarships, laboratories, apprenticeships. Lianhua looked at Joe. How much can I spend? He looked almost tired. You objected before they finished the first sentence. The first sentence had development. The later sentences have students. The delegation left with a commitment from Lianhua to fund scholarships for rural students and construct 2 teaching laboratories. Joe waited until the cars disappeared through the gates. You understand that trained aerospace workers will strengthen Baiyuan. They need education. Yes. Then stop talking. As you wish. The first student scholarship announcement produced 40,000 applications. Lianhua increased the fund. Gu Corp shares rose 2% after analysts praised the group's long-term talent strategy. She canceled the newspaper subscription for 3 days. On the 4th day, old Wu bought one at the village shop because the kitchen staff wanted the crossword. The front page showed an aerial photograph of Baiyuan. Where there had once been empty scrub, roads now traced clean lines between industrial buildings. The 2 test stands sat like enormous concrete instruments against the plateau. Dormitories and workshops clustered near the southern gate. Beyond Bai's land, new factories and warehouses spread towards Long Town. The headline read, "The city Bai built by refusing to build a city." Lianhua stared at it. I hate journalists. Old Wu's wife took the crossword page. They used a nice photograph. There should be less in it. Chunmei entered carrying the backward-eyed shark. The aquarium shop made a rocket shark. Lianhua turned slowly. The plush toy wore a tiny silver helmet and had a felt flame attached to its tail. No. Children love it. No. They sold 12,000 this week. Why would an aquarium sell a rocket shark? Because Tianyuan sponsored the new science room. Lianhua closed her eyes. Who approved that? Director Luo. Is it good for children? They get to build paper rockets and learn about sea satellites. What is a sea satellite? I don't know. Lianhua opened one eye. Then why did you say it? It sounded educational. She put the paper down. Fine, keep the shark away from the model rocket. Chunmei placed them together on the shelf. Too late. The final insult arrived in April. It came from a bank. Lianhua did not borrow money, so she initially refused the meeting. Zhou insisted. The bank's chairman arrived with a valuation team and a proposal for a credit facility secured against Bai Yuan. No, Lianhua said. Miss Bai, the facility would provide substantial liquidity at favorable rates. I already have liquidity. That is the problem. The chairman smiled politely, assuming humor. The bank values the Bai Yuan holding at 96 billion yuan. Lianhua stopped moving. How much? 96 billion, conservatively. Zhou looked away. She noticed. You knew. The latest independent estimate was 91. You hid 5 billion. I attempted mercy. The chairman continued. With the freight spur, supplier leases and industrial zone designation, the property has become one of the most strategically important privately controlled industrial landholdings in the province. Lianhua stared at him. It is dirt. Very well-positioned dirt. Chunmei made a choking sound behind her. The chairman misunderstood it as a cough. We could extend a facility of up to 30 billion yuan without requiring disposal of the asset. You want to give me more money because my useless land became expensive. In simplified terms. No. The rate is highly competitive. No. There is no obligation to draw the full amount. Please leave before the dirt learns banking. The chairman left with his proposal unsigned. Zhou remained. Lianhua stood at the library window for a long time. 6.1 billion, she said. For the original land rights. 9 billion with cleanup and initial infrastructure. Yes. 16 billion after the test complex and railway. A little more now. And 96 billion value. According to the bank. I made 80 billion yuan by purchasing salt and refusing to build a shopping center. Approximately. Stop saying approximately. Very well. She turned from the window. Sell it. Zhou went still. All of it. If it is worth 96 billion, sell it. Then I can spend the 96. To whom? Anyone stupid enough to pay 96 billion for dirt. And Tianyuan. Lease protects them. The supplier agreements. Protect them too. The clinic, dormitories, school facilities, grazing corridor, remediation covenants. Protect all of it. Zhou considered her. A buyer willing to accept those restrictions may offer less. Lianhua smiled. Good. The sale memorandum was prepared. It contained 47 pages of restrictions. No residential speculation within the protected core. No interference with Tianyuan's lease. No reduction in worker housing standards. No closure of the clinics without replacement. No obstruction of grazing rights. No abandonment of environmental monitoring. No conversion of the training facilities. No eviction of existing service operators during their protected terms. Attorney Liu called it one of the least commercially attractive sale packages he had ever drafted for an asset in such demand. Lianhua complimented him. Offers arrived anyway. The first consortium offered 84 billion. The second offered 88. A state-backed industrial fund offered 92 and accepted every covenant. Lianhua was delighted. Take 84. Attorney Liu stared at her. We cannot arbitrarily reject a materially better offer without a rational basis if the transaction involves connected corporate interests. Then find a rational basis. The 84 billion consortium requested amendment rights after 5 years. Reject them. The 88 billion bidder requested residential flexibility. Reject them. The 92 billion fund accepted the restrictions. Lianhua's delight disappeared. Why are they so cooperative? They view the restrictions as preserving strategic industrial use. Everyone is impossible. The sale was scheduled for final review. Then Tianyuan's board requested an emergency meeting. Lianhua attended by telephone from Qingshui Palace because she refused to travel to Baiyuan merely to hear people object to her selling dirt. Chen spoke first. If the land changes ownership, our lease remains valid. Correct. But future expansion becomes uncertain. You already have 71 square kilometers. We may need more. No. The new launch contracts require engine production to triple. Build upwards. Rocket factories do not work like apartment buildings. They should consider it. He sighed. Miss Bai, Baiyuan works because the surrounding land is controlled under one long-term plan. A new owner may honor the contracts, but change everything around them. That is their problem. It becomes our problem. A second voice joined the call. It was Dr. He Min, Tianyuan's finance director. The sale would also create a large taxable gain, personally. Lianhua paused. How large? Very. Good. You would still receive substantially more cash than you spent. Also good, I can spend it. Zhou, seated across from her, said, and selling one of the most strategically important holdings in the province immediately after developing it may cause the market to assume you are reallocating capital into something larger. I am not. The market may not believe you. The market needs a hobby. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, come to Baiyuan before you sign. Why? Because you haven't seen it in 2 months. I saw the newspaper. Come anyway. She almost refused. Then she heard children in the background. Why are there children at the test site? They are not at the test site. The university's new training center opened today. Lianhua looked at Zhou. He did not look surprised. Tomorrow, she said. Baiyuan no longer looked like the most useless land in China. That was obvious before the car reached the southern gate. The old patched road had become a wide divided route. Buses moved in both directions. The bypass curved around the village beneath rows of newly planted windbreak trees. The abandoned brickworks chimney remained standing, repaired and cleaned. Someone had preserved it as a marker of the old industrial site. Beside it stood the training center. Students crossed the courtyard carrying books and safety helmets. Some wore Tianyuan work jackets over university uniforms. Lianhua recognized one of the scholarship students from the mountain school that had visited Ocean World months earlier. The girl had been the one who became carsick on the bus. She was older than Lianhua remembered, or perhaps simply looked older in a lab coat. Miss Bai. She ran across the courtyard before remembering herself and slowing to a formal walk. You came. Apparently. We launched a weather balloon this morning. Did it explode? No. Everyone is disappointing me. The girl laughed. I want to work on satellites. Lianhua looked at Chen. This is your fault. Mostly yours. No. They walked through the training center. One laboratory contained composite panels being tested for heat resistance. Another held guidance electronics. Apprentices practiced welding on scrap pipe while instructors watched. The scholarship wall listed students from rural counties across the province. Lianhua stopped reading after the fifth name. Outside, the clinic had become a proper occupational health center that also treated residents from nearby villages twice a week. The canteen served 4,000 lunches a day. The daycare center had a waiting list. The shepherd route remained open. Uncle Pei's grandson now traveled on the worker bus to secondary school because the new route passed his winter camp. Lianhua stood beside the fence, watching sheep cross beneath the distant test towers. You arranged this, Joe said. I arranged rockets. You arranged the fences. She did not answer. The afternoon engine test began at 3. The new engine fired for 180 seconds without interruption. Students watched from the education gallery. Workers watched from outside the canteen. A group of village children counted down with the control room clock. The plume rose above the plateau like a second sunset. Lianhua felt the sound through the ground. When the engine shut down, applause traveled through the buildings. Chen stood beside her. Still want to sell? Yes. He smiled. You're lying. I am the owner. You cannot say that. Then fire me. That would make Tianyuan less valuable. Exactly. She looked at him. You have become arrogant. Successful rocket company. It happens. At sunset, Joe took her to the northern ridge. From there, Baiyuan spread below them. Lights appeared one by one along the roads and workshops. The supplier zone glowed beyond the test complex. Farther away, Long Town had expanded towards the new freight terminal. The old chemical yard was gone. In its place stood a fenced field of monitoring wells and young trees. The groundwater tests have been clean for 3 consecutive months, Joe said. Good. Professor Lin expects full remediation certification next year. Good. The land value will increase again after certification. She glared at him. You ruined it. I thought completeness mattered. They stood in silence. Lianhua took the sale memorandum from her coat. 92 billion yuan. Enough money to make the original purchase look absurdly small. Enough money to fund several more rockets, aquariums, roads, and whatever new disaster she could find. She should sell. That had been the purpose. Money in, money out, nothing attached. But the land was no longer nothing. That was the problem. Every time she tried to dispose of the inheritance, people moved into the space she created around it. Workers got paid. Children saw penguins. Engineers reached orbit. Students who had never imagined aerospace careers stood in laboratories built on soil nobody had wanted. She had spent months insisting that none of this was the point. Perhaps it wasn't. That did not make it unreal. She folded the memorandum. How much does it cost me each year if I keep it? Joe did not answer immediately. Maintenance, environmental monitoring, public services you subsidize, below-market facilities and infrastructure upkeep. Perhaps 700 million to 1 billion yuan once current construction settles. Her eyes narrowed. A year. Yes. Guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed. But likely. Yes. She looked across Baiyuan again. Cancel the sale. Joe nodded. I expected that. Do not be pleased. I am not. You look pleased. The wind. The wind is making you smile. Apparently. She tore the sale memorandum in half. Then into quarters. Then remembered Attorney Liu had the original. Tell Liu. I will. And raise the annual maintenance budget. Why? If I am stuck with profitable dirt, it can at least be expensive to own. Joe looked towards the lights. How much? Find something useful. He turned to her. Useful. Do not make a face. I made no face. The villages need anything. Several. Schools, clinics, roads. Yes. Fine, spend there, not on property values. Public services can improve property values. Then spend badly. I do not believe you mean that. She put her hands in her coat pockets. I mean expensive. That I believe. The sale cancellation became public the next morning. Markets interpreted it as a declaration of long-term confidence in Baiyuan. The valuation increased by another 4 billion yuan. Lianhua learned this from Chunmei, who had promised not to tell her and lasted 11 minutes. They were eating breakfast at Kingshui Palace. 96 became 100, Chunmei said. Lianhua lowered her spoon. Why? Because you didn't sell. Selling makes it valuable. Not selling makes it valuable. What action makes it less valuable? Old Wu entered carrying the Morning Post. There is a proposal from an airline. Lianhua looked at him. What airline? A regional carrier wants to establish a maintenance base near Baiyuan. Joe reached for the envelope. Lianhua reached faster. How much money does an airline lose? Joe's hand stopped. Chunmei began laughing. No, Joe said. Lianhua opened the envelope. I only asked a question. You asked the same kind of question before the aquarium. Aquariums are different. You asked it before Tianyuan. Rockets are different. You asked it before Baiyuan. Land is extremely different. Old Wu looked at Joe. Should I remove the rest of the post? Yes. Lianhua held the airline proposal against her chest. No. Joe sighed. Outside, Kingshui Palace's new road carried trucks towards Jinhai. At Ocean World, children queued beneath the whale's mouth wearing rocket shark hats. At Tianyuan, engineers began assembling the next Tianwan vehicle. At Baiyuan, the most useless land in China woke beneath a web of roads, workshops, classrooms, and test towers. A freight train crossed the northern boundary for the first time at 9:12 that morning. It carried cryogenic tanks, composite panels, and 12 containers of equipment for a company that had not existed when Bai Lianhua bought the land. The The shepherd families watched it pass from the southern ridge. Students in the training center paused beside the windows. Chen Kaifeng heard the horn from the engine workshop and smiled. Director Gao took a photograph. Shen Yudong received an alert that her remaining Western options had increased in value again and threw the report into a drawer. At Qingshui Palace, Lianhua read the first page of the airline proposal. The company had lost 860 million yuan the previous year. She sat straighter. Zhou noticed. No. I haven't said anything. Your face said something. Chunmei nearly fell off her chair. Lianhua looked down at the number again. 860 million yuan. Every year. Without launching anything. She folded the proposal carefully. Put this in the back pocket. Zhou stared at her. What back pocket? The one where we keep bad ideas until I need them. That pocket appears to be full. Get a bigger coat. She returned to her breakfast. For once, she did not ask how much Baiyuan was worth. She already knew the answer would annoy her. 112 square kilometers of useless dirt had become laboratories, workshops, roads, classrooms, and jobs. She had tried to bury money in the ground. Unfortunately, everything she buried seemed to grow.